Okay, I think I've got everything set up and we are ready to roll. Oh, what a couple of days it has been in Utah politics, and I am here to talk with you about all of it. We got a lot going on tonight. We've got brand new congressional map. Will it stick? If it does, it's going to scramble the 2026 congressional races here in Utah. But it might not stick. We've got court challenges coming up. I can talk about that. Republicans are hopping mad about this whole situation. They want to impeach the judge who implemented the new map. And if they decide to go down that road, they've got enough support to do that. In fact, they're actually spoiling for an impeachment fight. At least it sounds like they're spoiling for an impeachment fight with Lieutenant Governor Deidre Henderson. We're going to have a flood of Democratic candidates running for the new first congressional district. Again, if the map sticks. Anyway, we got a bunch to talk about tonight. And I want to hear what you want to talk about. I want to hear your questions, your comments. Leave them in the chat. Leave them below. Let me introduce myself. My name is Brian Schott. I am an independent journalist. I've been covering Utah politics for more than 25 years. And I am the publisher and managing editor of the website utahpolitics.news. Yep, move my domain over to utahpolitics.news. Easier to remember. You can find all of my content there at utahpolitics.news. So welcome in. Let's talk about what's going on in the gerrymandering case. The gerrymandering ruling came down late last night. It was really close to midnight. Yesterday, the 10th, was the yesterday was this thing here. Yesterday was the deadline that the judge had put in place to come up with a new map. Actually, it was the deadline that the state had put in place because they needed the new maps by the 10th of November, and the ruling came down really close to midnight last night, in which the judge shocked everybody, and instead of picking the legislature's map, option C, she said that map just trying to increase the gain here for the people on YouTube and Facebook. She said that the legislature's map was a gerrymander, and it was unfair. And so she picked one of the maps from the plaintiff. And let's get right into that. I'm going to bring that up right here. And press the right button. That would not be it. Here we go. On Redistrictor. Put that over here, actually. So this is what the map looks like on Redistrictor, which is a great tool for looking at this. And as you can see, there is a blue donut in the middle of all of this red. Where are the district lines? Let me make the district lines a little bit more prominent so we can see them better. There you go. I'll make the district labels a little bit bigger too. There, we can see that a little bit better now. So that's what the new map looks like. District 1, centered on most of Salt Lake County. We can zoom in on that right here. And it is pretty much almost all of Salt Lake County, save Sandy, South Jordan, Draper, Riverton, Bluffdale, and Harriman. Those are in the District 4 under this map chosen by the judge. Everything else is in Salt Lake County. Everything else in Salt Lake County is in District 1, and that is a blue county. That is a county, that is a district that Democrat Kamala Harris would have carried by a little over 23 points in the 2024 election. When was the last time you saw something like that in Utah? I certainly can't remember an overwhelmingly blue district like this. But this is what the map looks like. This is the map that the judge put in place. And if this map sticks, and we'll get to that in a second, but I don't know if the map is going to stick, but if it sticks, then it's going to scramble the way that elections work in the state, obviously, because we have not had a map that's looked like this as long as I can remember, where you had a Democratic district. And make no bones about it. This would be a Democratic district. In fact, Inside Elections did an analysis of the map. And what they found is that on this new map, the baseline in District 1 under the map, the 2021 map that was thrown out. Under that map, every single district was R plus at least 24. It went all the way up to R plus 34. It was either R plus 24 all the way up to R plus 34 in their ratings. That means essentially that a Republican would be expected, a generic Republican would be expected to easily win that district. The new map, the baseline for them under their calculations at Inside Elections is this first district is D plus 14. That is a 14 point, actually a 28, 30, 42 point swing. I'm terrible at math, but I think that's what it is. So it's a huge swing. But as they say in this map, this map that the judge imposed last night is still there's one district still tilted towards the Democrats, 3 districts tilted toward the Republicans, but it is the most fair map that has been passed anywhere in the United States this year. This is the most fair map that we've gotten, even though you still have 3 overwhelmingly Republican districts and 1 overwhelmingly Democratic district. Under the new map, and I'm reading from Inside Elections here, under the new map, Utah's 1st District is now a Democratic-leaning seat that covers most of Salt Lake County. Former Vice President Kamala Harris would have carried it by 24 percentage points. My calculation was 23. However, its baseline is only D plus 14, reflecting the fact that down-ballot Republicans perform better than Trump in Utah, given his uniquely bad fit for the state's GOP electorate. But according to the way, again, from Inside Elections, they say, according to commonly used ways to evaluate how gerrymandered a map is, Utah's new map is the first one to pass so far this year that is fairer than the one it replaced. For instance, according to Inside Elections baseline, all 4 districts under the old map were redder than R plus 10. None were Democratic-leaning or even competitive, but the new map turns one of those Republican-leaning seats into a Democratic-leaning one, such that now 3 districts are redder than R plus 10, and 1 district is bluer than D plus 10. And that's the map that the judge handed down last night. What do you think about that? Salar Ahmed on Facebook asks, how crowded do you think the Democratic primary for D1 will be? Well, let's get straight into that. I think you're going to have an avalanche of candidates. I think it is going to be something, probably more candidates, at least to start, than what we saw in the 2018 U.S. Senate primary on the Republican side, when we had a dozen candidates run. That was the race where Mike Kennedy defeated Mitt Romney in the Republican convention by just a handful of votes. Maybe it was by one vote, but Romney ran away with the primary election. So I think it's going to be very crowded, and we'll talk more about that. Shasta A. Sissy on Instagram says, I wish this map could be altered to show population density proportions in some way. Well, all of the districts have equal population. So there's no population density. And I'm not sure exactly what you're looking for. But all of the districts have equal population. Russ Rampton on Facebook, the land area between CD1 and CD3 is a powerful lesson in Utah's political geography. Remember, land does not vote. Prop 4, which are the rules that the legislature had to follow when they drew their map, and the plaintiffs as well, it said that the maps had to be as compact as possible. And the population they were shooting for in each district was 817,904. They're not exactly equal. They're using the population estimates as they stood in 2021. I'm sure that the population has shifted, but that was the target for each district in 2021, 817,904, and you could have a deviation of a very small deviation. It looks like the deviation here was, the biggest one was maybe 1,900 people. So they have to be equal population. But that's what your map is going to look like if it sticks. And that's the big question. Does this stick? Because the legislature is going to appeal the judge's ruling, and they might have a case. I'm not a lawyer, but there are some compelling arguments to be made. Let's go over that ruling that came down late last night from Judge Diana Gibson. And again, if you have a question, if you have a comment, please leave it in the chat. I will get to them as quickly as possible. I love the interaction. I appreciate you guys coming in with all your questions. This is important stuff, and I really enjoy talking about it and working through it with you. Do you know how long this lawsuit, this kind of blew me away. Do you know how long this lawsuit had been going on before we finally got the judge's decision yesterday? Yesterday was the 969th day since the lawsuit was filed. It was filed in March of 2022, I believe. And so we've been waiting a very long time for this. But the judge, in her ruling, Judge Diana Gibson, she rejected the map put forward by the legislature, saying that it was an extreme partisan outlier under the rules in Prop 4. And this is why she says that. You just look at the data. The map the legislature put forward had 4 Republican districts. And when the experts for the plaintiffs ran thousands of simulations trying to draw maps, they got maps with 4 Republican districts less than 1% of the time. It was actually 0.06% of the time. Another reason she threw it out, the map was drawn using partisan political data. Dave's redistricting was on the screen when the legislature's expert drew it. That's a no-no. You can't do that. It unnecessarily split cities and counties. Prop 4 said you need to keep communities together. The legislature's map said it split The legislature's map split 3 cities into 11 pieces and carved 3 counties 4 times. Here's another reason why it looked like it was a partisan outlier. The least Republican district on the legislature's map had an expected Republican vote share of 56%, which was a statistical outlier across all of the simulations. And she even struck down the law put forward by Senator Brady Brammer that attempted to rig the process for the legislature's map. If you remember, SB 1011 attempted to codify what standards they were going to use to judge whether these maps were a partisan gerrymander or not. And one of the things the judge said in her ruling was that it was strange that under SB 1011, a map that had 1 Democratic district and 3 Republican districts would be seen as a partisan gerrymander, but a map with 4 Republican districts would not be. And she said that didn't make any sense. So she enjoined that law. And that's why she picked this map that you see on the screen. And we'll get back to that in a minute. Trying to go through some of the questions on TikTok. I have to do that on my iPad so I can see those. Rob801 says, what is likely challengeable in this ruling? Why may it not stick? Here's the thing that a lot of people, a distinction that people are not making in this. Prop 4 is a law. It was a ballot initiative passed by the voters. So it is a law. It is a statute. It is the same as any statute that the legislature passes. However, the Utah Constitution says that it is the job of the legislature to draw political maps, to draw the districts. And the Constitution, Article 9, Section 1, specifically says the legislature shall draw the districts. Well, they didn't draw the districts here. They did not draw the districts. The plaintiffs in the lawsuit drew the districts, and the judge implemented them. And we have not, I've said this on every single live stream, but we have not litigated this question in court. And the question is, the question that we have not looked at is whether or not Prop 4 itself is unconstitutional. That question has not been raised in litigation. The question that was answered by this lawsuit is whether the legislature unconstitutionally repealed a ballot initiative, a law passed by the people, and the decisions were yes, they did. But we have not looked at the question of whether this law that was passed by the people, which takes the constitutional job of drawing maps away from lawmakers and gives it to, under Prop 4, an independent commission, and in this case, a group of the plaintiffs, lawyers, because there is an argument to be made that is unconstitutional. And I think that if this map does not stick, if they can get a court to agree with that, then another court may take the map passed by the legislature and implement that, or they might just say the 2021 maps stay in place. And I was having this conversation with someone earlier today. They said, but the 2021 maps were declared unconstitutional. We have used unconstitutional maps in congressional elections in this decade. It happened in Alabama, it happened in Mississippi. Those maps were declared unconstitutional, but the U.S. Supreme Court said, no, we're going to go ahead and use them. And they used them for one election and then addressed it afterwards. So there is still the very real chance that the 2021 maps are in place when the election happens. So this is not over by any means. So I hope that answers your question, Rob. Instagram question: how do we pressure Cox to do the right thing? I don't understand what the right thing is. Spencer Cox is out of this decision loop. He supports an appeal from the legislature to the Utah Supreme Court. And if they can't find any satisfaction there, they will appeal to a federal court or the U.S. Supreme Court. But I don't know what the right thing is. Cox stopping an appeal, he's not in this decision tree. League of Women Voters Utah, who was one of the plaintiffs in the case, they're on the Instagram tonight, and they said Article 1, Section 2 says the people can change the form of government. That's what Prop 4 says. But they didn't change the Constitution. That's the question. The Constitution still remains. And when you have a conflict between a statute and the Constitution generally wins. And so you would have to change the Constitution. And oh, by the way, the only people who can suggest changes to the Constitution are the legislature. And I don't think that they're going to want to change the Constitution to take away their power to draw the maps. I'm not saying this is how it's going to go down, but I'm saying that there is a very, very compelling argument that I think the legislature can make. And that's why I think that this whole process is not done. Question from Facebook: what argument can the plaintiffs make on an appeal to help the maps stick? The plaintiffs really, I don't know what argument they make. They can make the argument that in Article 1, Section 2, it says the people can change the form of government. It also says in the Constitution that all political power flows from the people. But there's a conflict between the Constitution and the law. And I don't know how that plays out. I don't know how you get a court to say that the Constitution doesn't... Well, okay, I'm not going to say that because we've seen the U.S. Supreme Court in recent months say that's not what the Constitution says, even though it's what the Constitution says. So I'm not going to make any predictions. I just think that this is it's a question that we have not litigated yet. It's a question that we have not, it hasn't had its day in court, and I suspect it will. But let's talk about, okay, so let's live in the world where we are right now, because the world we're at right now is these maps are the maps. This map, and let me bring it up here again. This map is the map. This is the map. I feel like Dora the Explorer. This is the map that exists at this moment. Who runs where? Who runs in what district? Because as I reported, I did an analysis. None of the incumbent Republicans live in the 2nd district, which is in northern Utah. There is no incumbent who lives there. Blake Moore does live in the 1st district, but everyone expects him to run in the 2nd district. Burgess Owens, he lives in the 4th district. His home in Draper is in the 4th district right now. Mike Kennedy, who lives in Alpine, and Celeste Malloy, who lives in St. George, Cedar City actually, they're both in the same district. So who goes where? That's the question. So let's assume that Blake Moore goes into the 2nd district, which makes sense. He's been representing northern Utah, even though he has not lived in that district his entire... well, he does now, but he didn't live in the district when he first was elected. So let's assume that Blake Moore goes there. Does Burgess Owens stand pat and stay in the 4th district? He's got seniority. He's been in Congress longer than both Malloy and Kennedy. Kennedy's just a freshman. Owens almost became the chair of the House Education Committee. He's got a lot more support. He's got a lot more seniority than Kennedy. So does Owens stand pat and stay in 4? And then you have to, then it would be between Kennedy and Malloy to run in the 1st district, where they would probably lose. And it makes 0 sense for Celeste Malloy, who lives in Cedar City, to run in that 1st district. I don't see how Malloy makes that case. So if Malloy would run in the 3rd district, or Kennedy would primary her in the 1st district to see who stayed. And I don't think Kennedy wins that, because I was talking with a political wonk acquaintance of mine, and they were trying to break down which voters from the previous map remained with which member of Congress. And Celeste Malloy, if she stays in the 3rd district, if she stays in this 3rd district, she would retain about a little more than 50% of her voters. Kennedy and Owens, most of the voters, almost over 3/4 of the voters in that district, had not cast a ballot for them before. And that's a big thing. So I don't know if Kennedy wins that primary. So does Kennedy get thrown to the wolves and go into District 1? Or does Owens say, you know what, I'll take the bullet and lose? Or does Owens retire? He's, I think, 78 right now, or will be 78. So who runs where? That is going to be a battle royale, again, assuming the map sticks. But that's the world we live in right now, where this map exists. On TikTok, my guess is the GOP leadership makes Owens retire so the others can shift without losing an election. Your guess is as good as mine. I did hear, I had heard from people who were pretty well connected, that had the legislature's map gone into effect, that Owens would have retired. And people all day were telling me that they thought the legislature was lucky that their map, option C, was not picked by the judge, because that map created 2 competitive seats. And given what we saw last week, and the fact that this election in 2026, which is still a year away, so we can't make too many concrete predictions, but it certainly looks like we're shaping up to have a wave election. And if you have the map that the legislature passed, which had 2 districts that were R+6 and R+2, there's a very good chance that 2 Democrats could have won. So a lot of people who are not the legislature, a lot of people who work on congressional campaigns for a living and know what they're talking about, said that the legislature is very, very lucky that the map that they passed was not chosen by the judge, in their opinion, because they think that there is a wave coming, a Democratic wave coming, and the map that the legislature drew, which had 2 competitive districts, are the exact kind of districts that get flipped in a wave election. James Evans on YouTube says, constitutional issues aside, for the moment, if the deadline was November 10th, how could another map be implemented? Okay, so the deadline was November 10th. That's what the lieutenant governor said. State law says that the deadline for transmitting information about the maps to the counties, because it's the counties who will be running these elections, the deadline for the lieutenant governor's office to send these maps to the county, send all the election information, is November 15th. So that's the next deadline. That's when the lieutenant governor has to do their job. The real deadline is January 2nd, because that is the day that candidates start filing for office. And it would be very difficult for a court to change the maps, to put a different map in place after that deadline once candidates have filed to run. Because there's a lot of paperwork, there's a lot of stuff with the FEC. So the real deadline is January 2nd. The next deadline that is in Utah statute is November 15th. The lieutenant governor shall transmit the information to the counties so they can start getting ready. And that makes sense. The counties need to know who's in which district and what the districts look like and what the precincts look like and how to set up their ballots. Because they have to send their ballots out to get printed. So there's a lot of moving parts. But that is the deadline. The deadline itself, the deadline is January 2nd. If a court steps in anytime before then and says, we're not using this map that the plaintiffs put forward, that the judge picked, we're not using that map, we're going back to the 2021 map, a court could do that. So we're not out of the woods yet. And that's why I keep saying if the map sticks. Nathan Detroit says on YouTube, how do you think the new Supreme Court of Utah nominee will address this? All the reporting about him emphasizes he's an originalist. I'm not. Is he going to be in? If the Utah, I don't think he's going to be in office before the emergency appeal reaches the Utah Supreme Court, which, I mean, they're clearly asking for something before the 15th. And if the Utah Supreme Court grants that emergency appeal, then I think we're done. I think we're done with this map, and whatever map they decide goes into effect. So I'm not sure. I don't know what the timeline is. So unfortunately, I really can't answer that. Scroll back a little bit on TikTok and see if we have any other answers. Or questions, sorry. Is this the thing that the Utah GOP puts pressures on legislators to resign or just try to run again? I'm sure that there is some pressure. A lot of it just sorts itself out. A lot, and that pressure has sort of gone away. At least the punch of that pressure with the signature path, allowing candidates to get around the caucus and convention system. So pretty much anyone can run if you can get enough signatures. And if you're unfamiliar with that, the number of signatures you need to get for a congressional race is 7,000. You need to get 7,000 registered voters from your party who live in a particular district. And I probably should have done this earlier, and I didn't, but I will have the information for you either on social media or on utahpolitics.news or a future live stream, just how many registered Democrats there are in CD1, because that would be a finite number of people who could sign a petition for a candidate. Because once you sign a petition for one candidate, you can't sign it for another candidate. And whoever turns in that petition first, whoever turns that name in first, then the other names, the other petitions that have the name on it are invalidated. Nathan Detroit says, I think Ben McAdams doesn't win the primary in the new CD1. SLCO Dems voters, not party leadership, will push for a progressive. I saw someone say Nate Bluen is too conservative. I disagree with this. I think that if Ben McAdams runs, and he's expected to run, he's expected to announce his candidacy sometime this week. If he runs, I think that McAdams is, I think the delegate fight at convention is going to be messy. I think it's going to be a bruising battle. And the reason why is a lot of Democrats are still mad, or at least there's a lot of division in the party still, over the whole Evan McMullin gambit in 2022, in which McAdams helped lead the charge for Democrats to not field a U.S. Senate candidate against Mike Lee allowing Evan McMullin to run as an independent head-to-head against Mike Lee. And even though McMullin lost, you do have to acknowledge that the strategy was sound. The strategy worked. Why? Because it was the closest U.S. Senate race in decades. It was the closest U.S. Senate race, I think, since 1976, when Orrin Hatch unseated Frank Moss. It was just over 10 points, a 10-point margin. The average margin of victory in recent U.S. Senate races in Utah was the Republican winning by 33 points. And the same thing would have happened had the Democrats put someone in the race. It actually would have been worse because they would have split the vote with McMullin. So you do have to say that the you do have to say that the strategy by McAdams was sound, but there are still a number of Democrats who are upset about this, and I think that the primary, or at least the convention fight, is going to be rough. McAdams will obviously gather signatures. He's got a machine. He's got the political infrastructure that's still there. The people who helped him win in 2018 and almost win in 2020, they're still in place. So I think he's going to be a very formidable opponent, and I think if he does get into a primary, you have to say he's the odds-on favorite to win. Just because of who he is. He is the most prominent Democrat in the state. He was the last Democrat to win a big office in Utah. But I think you're right, Nathan, that whoever wins that Democratic primary in District 1, again, if the map sticks, but whoever wins that primary can pretty much book their ticket to Washington. That's why it's going to be a bruising fight, and that's why you're going to see, I think, so many Democrats jump into this race. McAdams is in. There are already 7 other Democrats. I think another one filed tonight, so that would be 8. And if McAdams gets in, that's 9. And I'm hearing people who have run many times in the past. I'm hearing Scott Howell. That's a name from the past who might think about running. Does Jenny Wilson decide to get in? Does Caroline Gleiss decide to get in? Or Caroline Gleick decide to get in? Who knows? Former State Senator Derek Kitchen is on the live stream on Instagram tonight, and he just says, does former Senator Derek Kitchen get in that race? I can tell you this, if these maps stay, it is going to be so much fun to watch, especially for someone like me. And I don't know if I've ever said this on a live stream before, but one of my philosophies in life is that, I'm in my 50s and I don't have a lot of milestones ahead of me in life. Most of my big milestones are in the past. I mean, I've got children getting married. My daughter's getting married next year. That's something to look forward to. But a lot of these big milestones, there aren't very many of them left for me personally. So I actively root for chaos. I've heard people say you're biased, you're liberal biased, you're biased towards Democrats. I'm biased towards chaos. Why? Because it's interesting. It's interesting. It makes stories interesting. And I think that a race for the nomination in a Democratic-leaning seat, a D+14 seat according to Inside Elections, that's going to be interesting as hell. So that's what I'm looking forward to. Emily on TikTok says, do you think we will get a true liberal or will we get a left-leaning Republican? It's going to be wide open. Salt Lake, there is a reason why the legislature carved up Salt Lake County into 4 pieces under the 2021 maps. They did not want to elect someone who was not a rock-ribbed conservative. So I don't know what kind we'll get. I mean, Ben McAdams is clearly a conservative Democrat. I think that there's a lane for a progressive, I think there is a lane for, there's going to be a number of lanes open, and whoever gets in the certain lanes first is going to have an advantage. That's what happened to Brad Wilson in 2024 when he stepped down as Speaker of the Utah House to run for U.S. Senate. He never found a lane to run. He had a lot of money that he spent on that race. I think he spent $3 million of his own money on that race, but he never found a lane. Trent Staggs ran to the right of him. John Curtis was the establishment and had the best name recognition. And Wilson could never figure out where his lane was going to be. He never made a compelling case as to why he should be elected. And that's one of the main reasons why he lost. And I think there are several lanes for Democrats to run. But again, this is not a Democrat majority district. I broke down the numbers for voter registration, and it's about 33% Republican, 33% nonpartisan, and 25% Democrat. But it is Democrat leaning because you've got a lot of nonpartisan people, don't belong to either party, who do vote for Democrats. And that's where the strength is. So if you think that you're going to run far left and pull those independents that you're going to need to win, and you're still going to need to attract some Republicans. This, again, it is not a Democrat majority district. It has a Democrat lean. It's D+14, but it is not majority Democrat. Democrats, registered Democrat voters, still make up only 25% of this first congressional district. In every other district, they are at 10% or less. So it is still not a Democrat majority district. It does favor a Democrat, and whoever wins the Democratic nomination is the odds-on favorite to be the winner, because that's the way that they vote. So there's going to be a number of lanes for candidates. There's not an infinite number of lanes, but there will be certain lanes. Chelsea on TikTok says, so many Republicans in this district are actually Democrats but vote in Republican primaries. We talked about that in the last live stream, and I've reported on this. That is a myth. That is not true. There is not an overwhelming number of Democrats. There are some, but this started in 2020. This started in 2020 when former state senator, former Democratic Party chair Jim Dabakis said he was urged Democrats to switch to the Republican Party so they could vote in the Republican primary. If you look at the numbers that happened, about 90,000 Utahns did switch their party affiliation in 2020. But most of those were independents who were joining the GOP. They weren't Democrats. I think the number of Democrats was close to 9,000. And only about 2,500 of them returned to the Democratic Party when it was over. But most of the people who became Republicans in 2020 were independents who wanted to join the Republicans so they could vote in the gubernatorial primary. So that is a myth. It's a persistent myth. I think it's a fairy tale that Democrats tell themselves, but there's no data to back that up. So sorry to burst your bubble, but that's the way it is. Just Gemma on TikTok says, registered Republican here, I only vote Democrat. Stacy Bird says, I am exactly that kind of registered Republican, only for primaries. Yeah, there are some of you, but there's not enough to make a huge impact. Salar Ahmed, sorry if I'm pronouncing your name incorrectly, on Facebook says, does McAdams keep running under a hypothetical 2021 map scenario in your mind? People I've talked to are close to McAdams, and he's staying very mum on this, but he's running no matter what. He's running no matter what the maps look like. I don't know which district he's going to run in, but he is running no matter what the maps look like. No matter what map we have, he is running. So McAdams is in. If we go back to the 2021 maps, his path is very narrow. He's going to need a lot of help. I don't know what his odds are. I haven't done any real thinking about that, but I know that he's going to run no matter what. Solar also says, is the Hispanic lane of D1 big enough to elect a Democrat from that community in your mind? I'm thinking Escamilla and Angela Romero when I'm talking about the Hispanic lane. I think the only data we have about this is when Escamilla ran for Salt Lake City mayor against Aaron Mendenhall. The west side of Salt Lake City did not turn out to vote. If you looked at the precinct by precinct numbers, there were some precincts that didn't register a single vote in that contest, or maybe one vote or two votes for Escamilla, and that just didn't get it done. So if you're talking about the Hispanic lane and looking at the west side of Salt Lake City, where that community traditionally lives, they have not been a political force. At least the data that we have says it doesn't suggest that is enough to make a difference. I could be wrong. Things could change. Every election is different. But the only data that we really have for that was when Escamilla ran for Salt Lake City mayor against Aaron Mendenhall. And the west side did not give Escamilla enough of a boost to help her win. I think she would be as good a candidate as anybody. Romero would be as good a candidate as anybody. And you're going to see a lot of people, a lot of Democrats who would not give this a second look under any other map, look at this map with the big blue spot in the middle of that sea of red and think, maybe. And they're going to jump in. It's going to take a lot of money still. There's going to be a lot of money because whoever the Republican is who runs in that race, they're going to have a lot of support from the National Party. Again, assuming these maps are still in place. But they're going to need a lot of money to make that happen. This is fun. You guys have some good questions tonight. A lot of good discussion. This is great. Integral Suspect on YouTube. The Democrats that are registered Republicans are probably higher information voters. We'd likely have a higher representation of them on these streams than in the general public. Maybe. Let's go with that. Only smart people tune in to these streams. And welcome. I love smart people. I wish lower information voters would be more interested in this sort of thing. There's a lot of people who don't even know what the hell is going on with these maps. And they don't start paying attention until right before the election. And I get it. I mean, life is chaotic. But if you're here, you're smart. Thank you, Integral Suspect. I am taking your suggestion. If you are on the stream tonight, you are smart and welcome. And I love having you here. Let's see. Over on TikTok, a question. I can't read your name. I'm sorry, but it says, does this map affect city officials? No. This is for Congress only. This is for the 4 seats in Congress. And you know that we're in line to get a 5th seat in 2030, right? The way the census is trending, Utah's probably going to have a 5th seat in Congress then. That's going to be a whole nother bag of fun once that happens. Nathan Detroit on YouTube. Speaking of lanes, is there room for both Doug Owens and Ben McAdams in the new CD1 in the primary? Can Doug Owens run again? I mean, I guess if we get a map like this, normally if you've lost in the past, if you're an election loser, voters are not apt to give you a second chance unless something weird happens. I know McAdams lost. I know Owens lost. But they both would be the conservative Democrat lane. I don't know if Owens can raise as much money as McAdams. McAdams can raise a lot of money. When he lost to Burgess Owens by less than 4,000 votes in 2020, he raised over $5 million, over almost $6 million for that race. He can raise a lot of money. He can raise it fast. And he's already got a conservative PAC, the Welcome PAC, which is a PAC that backs centrist candidates. They're already soliciting money for McAdams. So he'll be able to build up his war chest real fast. Emily on TikTok, if this map sticks, we'll have a large turnout since their vote now counts. I would think so. I would think that we'd have a big turnout. President Jinx on TikTok gets to a topic that I want to get to. Do you think the judge will actually be removed by the GOP? If you don't know what we're talking about, if you don't know what I mentioned here, even before this decision came down, Representative Matt McPherson, who is a Republican in West Valley City, put on X/Twitter that he has opened a bill file for articles of impeachment against Judge Gibson. I've been hearing from Republicans for a couple of months that they might try to impeach the judge. It's never happened here in Utah before. They came close one time. There was a judge who was accused of some crime, but they resigned after the articles of impeachment had been introduced. But they've never actually impeached a judge. Under the Constitution, in order to impeach a judge, and this is the Utah Constitution, you need a 2/3 vote in the House to impeach them, and then there's a trial in the Senate, which you need a vote to remove them from office. If the Republicans want to do this, they certainly have the numbers to do this. They need 50 votes in the House. They need 20 votes in the Senate. They have 61 in the House. They have 22 in the Senate. They have enough votes to do this if they want to. And if they choose to go down this road, they can remove this judge. And for the last couple of years, they have been spoiling for a fight with the judiciary. They have run legislation attacking the judiciary. If you remember, there was the bill that affected how the Supreme Court chose a Chief Justice of the Utah Supreme Court. That was last year. There were bills about presumption and injunctions. There have been a lot of bills attacking the judiciary. This would be the most blatant attack on the judiciary, the most open attack on the judiciary in years. But I think that if they want to do this, they have the numbers to do this. But here's the thing to watch. They are not going to bring this to the floor of the House unless they have those 50 votes. If they cannot get 50 solid yes votes in their caucus, in their closed caucus, if they can't get that, you're never going to see this come to the House floor. It's not going to happen. They might have a committee hearing on it that will give them a chance to yell about activist judges. Let them work some things out emotionally. But they're not going to bring this to the floor unless they know it's going to work. Because that would be really embarrassing. Like, that would be incredibly embarrassing for legislative leadership to try this and have it fail. So, if they want to do it, they certainly have the numbers in the Republican caucus, and the Democrats won't be able to do anything about it. If it comes to the floor, it's a done deal. It's over with. It's finished. If it comes to the floor, it will happen because the Senate has to have a trial. They can't ignore this. If the House impeaches this judge, the Senate has to have a trial. And there will be tremendous pressure on the senators to vote to remove Gibson from office. And I don't know if you caught this earlier today, but apparently Representative McPherson was really enjoying the attention that he got for saying he wants to impeach the judge, because he also started rattling sabers about possibly impeaching Lieutenant Governor Henderson as well, because Republicans were saying that Henderson should reject this map from the judge because they're saying it is unconstitutional, because it was not drawn by the legislature, and the Constitution says that the legislature draws the maps. So, getting high on his own supply, McPherson said he started making noise. He didn't say it specifically, but started making noise about impeaching other state officers who failed to uphold their oath to the Utah Constitution. More likely than not, this is just a bunch of noise signifying nothing, to aggressively paraphrase Shakespeare. But if they certainly have the numbers to do it, so if they want to, they can, but it's all going to come down to the want to. Do they want to do this? And if it comes to the floor, if you see this come to the floor, there you go. That means that we are going to, that means that it's a done deal. Jack Clark says on TikTok, which Republican congressman currently do you think will run in the district? That's the question. We talked about that a little bit earlier. I don't know. Whoever does run will have to change the way that they campaign. Instead of the race being for the Republican nomination and then cruise control to November, they will have to campaign and engage with their opponent. They'll have to actually convince voters. They will start with a head start because there are more Republicans in that district than there are Democrats, slightly more Republicans than there are nonpartisan voters. It does lean to the Democratic Party. The Salt Lake County district is D+14 according to Inside Elections. But I don't know. I suspect that if this map stays in place, you'll probably, if I were a betting man, I would say that it's more likely than not that Burgess Owens decides to retire. He's in his late 70s. Does he want to try to run in that district? Or does he try to Bigfoot Mike Kennedy and keep him out of the 4th district? I don't know. I'm sure you will see some ambitious centrist Republican try to run. They will get absolutely stomped at convention because that kind of politics does not play in the Republican convention. They will get stomped. But if they collect enough signatures, it won't matter. And that could make it interesting. You can talk about how this district is D+14 all you want, but it still comes down to candidate quality. Still comes down to which candidates can raise the most money, can run the best campaigns. And money is a huge part of this. There is an acquaintance of mine who has run a number of congressional campaigns, and one thing they said to me has always stuck. Having money makes the difference between running the kind of campaign you want to run and the kind of campaign you are forced to run. How many times have we seen candidates run out of money towards the end of the campaign? They're just not getting the donations, and then they have to cut back at very crucial moments in the campaign. Besmirch on TikTok says, when you realize you know a now legislator from 20 years back and remember why you didn't like them. Someone says he is a childhood friend. He knows so little but likes to troll. He loves having this attention. I'm assuming that they are talking about Representative McPherson. James Evans 939 says, if they go after the judge and lieutenant governor and don't like plaintiffs equals, common factors are going after women. Lots of women are not super happy with the electeds. Not great optics. This is something that happened a few years ago, and I don't know if you'll remember this. Let me bring up my notes here. But Between 2009 and 2020, Governor Gary Herbert sent 108 judicial nominees to the Utah Senate. Only 4 of them faced any kind of pushback. And the commonality between all 4 of them, they were women. In 2020, Margaret Plain was a qualified attorney. She was nominated to the Utah Court of Appeals. She wasn't even given a hearing by the Republican-led Senate. She was actually a finalist for a Supreme Court vacancy. She was the Salt Lake City attorney under 2 mayors, won Lawyer of the Year by the Women Lawyers of Utah, but the Senate would not schedule a hearing for her nomination because she had worked for Democratic mayors. In 2012, Sue Chon was nominated, and the Senate Judicial Confirmation Committee voted 4-2 to reject her nomination to the 3rd District Bench, but the full Senate eventually did confirm her 17-10. But she was the first judicial nominee in memory to fail to get a favorable appointment from the Senate Confirmation Committee. 2 others, Catherine Conklin in 2013, the Senate refused to take a vote on her nomination to serve as a 2nd District Judge. It was the first time since 2008 that they didn't approve a nominee. She was later reappointed by Governor Cox in 2024. And Camille Nider, she was confirmed 18-2 to the 2nd District Court. She was Utah's first openly LGBTQ plus judge, but 2 senators voted against her. And Alan Christensen acknowledged her sexual orientation was a role in his vote. But the only judges between 2008 and 2020 to get any sort of pushback from the legislature were women. And I think that James Evans puts his finger on it. You and I were thinking about the same thing. The judge that they want to impeach, Judge Diana Gibson, a woman, Lieutenant Governor Deidre Henderson, a woman, it's not a good look. It really isn't. Emily on TikTok says, is this map a done deal for the midterms, or they can appeal before then? They can appeal. And as I said, there were 3 deadlines we were working with. The lieutenant governor said November 10th was their deadline for getting a new map because they need to get a whole bunch of things in order, because by Utah law, they have to transmit the information for the election to the counties by November 15th. So that's the 2nd deadline. It's right there in statute. November 15th, they have to send this information to the county so they can get everything set on their end. The real deadline is January 2nd because that's the day the candidates start filing for office. So whatever map is in place on January 2nd is going to be the map. It'll be very hard for a court to switch the map. But I think until then, any court could step in, issue a stay, and decide which map would be in place. And I know that the judge said that the 2021 map is unconstitutional, but in this decade, Mississippi and Alabama ran elections using maps that were unconstitutional because the Supreme Court, the U.S. Supreme Court, ordered them to, and there's a very real possibility that this case makes its way to the U.S. Supreme Court, and who knows what they'll say. Nathan Detroit brings up another good point. The only female statewide elected official, that's Auditor Tina Cannon, they're trying to kick her out of her office in the Capitol. And why? Because the Utah Senate and the Utah House want more space for offices for their officials. They have those 2 huge buildings that they built up on the Capitol complex that were built when the Capitol had to undergo a seismic retrofit. That's where they actually held the session for a couple of years. But that's not enough. Now the Republicans, they want to have all of their offices in the Capitol, so they're trying to kick the auditor out of her office, Tina Cannon, and put her in, I think, in the Senate building. It's not a good look. It really isn't. Troy Riley on TikTok says, how gerrymandered are the 2021 maps? If we have a blue wave, could Dees still pick up a seat? Very unlikely. If you go by the ratings from Inside Elections, and they have a baseline rating of maps, it takes into effect partisan results from the last couple of elections. The districts, Burgess Owens' district was R plus 34. Celeste Malloy's district is R plus 24. When Ben McAdams won in a blue wave in 2018 and defeated Mia Love by less than 1,000 votes, that district was R plus 8 or 9. You would need an incredibly huge wave to flip an R plus 24 or R plus 34 seat. So I think it's going to be very, very hard. It's not impossible. Not impossible at all, but it would be very hard to do that if the 2021 maps are still in place. Besmirch says Ben can raise a lot of money. He can win a plurality primary, but would lose a two-candidate one. Maybe. Again, all of this is speculation. But Ben McAdams, just if you look at it, he's got the best name recognition of any candidate out there. And there are two things in politics. You either have name recognition or you spend money to get name recognition. That's two ways to do it. And you need name recognition. I'm going to bring up Brad Wilson again. I had conversations with people who were allies of Wilson when they were talking about when he jumped in that U.S. Senate race. And I would say to them, people don't know who the hell he is. Yes, he's the Speaker of the House, but nobody knows who the hell he is. People know who Ben McAdams is. And again, now we're back to low information voters. If you're looking at a ballot and you don't know any of the other names and you see Ben McAdams, that's a huge advantage. I'm not saying that he's going to win. I'm saying he's probably well positioned to win. He's got a good chance of winning. And until somebody proves me wrong, I would say that he would be the favorite to win the Democratic primary in that seat. I could be wrong. I've been wrong in the past. I'm not wrong that often, which is part of the reason why you come on these live streams and ask me questions, and I appreciate it. But I do have to acknowledge that if it gets into a plurality primary, somebody could win with 30% of the vote. Somebody could win with 20% of the vote. Because we do not have a way of, we don't have a runoff election. That is not something that we do here in Utah. So if you do get more than three or more candidates in a primary, yeah, it's a crapshoot. Which is why I don't bet money on it. Stephen Burt, who is, I believe he is running for Congress. He's declared his candidacy. He's on the Instagram tonight, and he says they don't miss an opportunity, speaking of legislators and Republicans, they don't miss an opportunity to speak in terms of Judge Diana Gibson's ruling rather than the court's ruling. I believe that's deliberate. Yeah, it is. It absolutely is. Kelly Mousley on Instagram says, could higher insurance premiums and no insurance cause such a wave? It could, but remember, the election is a year away. And in our news cycle, a week is a lot. A lot happens in a day, let alone a year. So what you think might be the biggest factor in next November's election might not even be a thing. Talk to me when we get closer to that. Jack Clark says, do you see Stuart Adams and company crushing any dissent in the legislature regarding this issue? I'm not sure which one you're talking about, the maps or impeaching the judge, but yes, President Stuart Adams runs that caucus with an iron fist. Everything happens behind closed doors. It does not happen on the floor unless he wants it to happen. That's why he and outgoing Senator Daniel Thatcher clashed so often. Because Thatcher refused to follow the script. And he got punished for it, and that's why he left the Republican Party. Paulette Skyart says, healthcare has been a thing for years. We're reaching a tipping point. At some point, it is going to break. I agree with you. At some point, it is going to break. But it hasn't yet. And at some point, it has to break. I don't know what's going to cause it to break, but at some point, it has to break. Nathan Detroit says, anything you're looking at for the upcoming interim session? I'm sure the maps are going to be talked about. We haven't started to see the agendas yet. That's next week. So we're not really sure what's on the agendas. It is the final interim session. This is the last chance for these interim committees to suggest legislation for the upcoming session. I'm sure that you will see somebody try to sneak something through. A couple of years ago, then Senator Mike Kennedy tried to get his ban on gender-affirming health care for transgender youth. He tried to get the Health and Human Services Interim Committee to sign off on it, and they wouldn't do it. The reason why he wanted to do that, he was trying to play the system. If you can get an interim committee to approve a piece of legislation, then it only needs one committee hearing before it comes up for a vote in both the House and the Senate. And sometimes it doesn't even need that. But if you can get an interim committee to sign on to a piece of legislation, it's much easier to get it through the process. And on the final interim, the November interim, a couple of years ago, then Senator Mike Kennedy, who's now in Congress, he was the committee chair of Health and Human Services, so he controlled the agenda, and he put his bill to ban gender-affirming care for transgender youth. He put it on the agenda, but he couldn't get it through. And the reason he was trying to get it through is because then it wouldn't have hit many roadblocks when it came to the full legislature. So that's one of the games that they play up there on the Hill. That's one of the things that they try to do. So watch these agendas very carefully, because this is the last chance where they can get a committee bill. They call it a committee bill, meaning that it was approved by an interim committee. It has to pass in both the Senate and the House in the committee hearings. So in an interim committee, they have members from the House and the Senate on those committees, and it has to get a majority of the Senate members and a majority of the House members to pass. If it does that, it basically sails through. Kennedy was trying to do that because he wanted to avoid what happened when those bills came up for committee during the session. The committee hearings were emotional. They were hours long. There was a lot of very emotional testimony, and it's not a good news environment for the legislature when that happens, because it takes up a lot of attention. So he tried to slide it through. I don't know if they're going to try to do anything like that again this time around, but they might. So be on the lookout for that. But I don't know if we're going to have, again, so as we're getting ready to wrap up, because we've been here for more than an hour, and I really appreciate it. This has been fun tonight. You guys have had some really great questions. This has been a blast. I really enjoy this. And so thank you for tuning in. But if there's anything else you want to bring up before we sign off for the evening, now's your chance. Let's see, over on TikTok. Besmirch says Steve, and I think he's talking about Stephen Burt, who's on the Instagram. So I'm reading a comment from TikTok about someone who's on Instagram. Technology is amazing. But Besmirch says Steve has also said he wants to run independently in his home district, which I think is District 3. Well, in this map, that's the big one. I'll bring this up again so everyone can get a good look at it. That's the big district that wraps all the way around the state. And isn't it kind of funny that on this map, you've got Park City and St. George in the same district? I just find that odd. Emily on TikTok says, if they had gotten Map C, would that have been better than the current 2021 maps? As I said earlier, Some Republicans who have worked on a number of campaigns say that they think the legislature is very lucky that the judge did not pick Map C, because there are two competitive districts that could have flipped in a wave election, and they seem to think we're going to have a wave election in 2026. All signs are pointing to that. Why do you think that the Republicans have been trying to redistrict in Texas and in other states to make sure to keep their majority? And think about this. If we do, if the election plays out the way some people think, and control of Congress comes down to 1 or 2 seats, how crucial do you think this first district in Utah is going to be, again, if these maps stick? How intense is the fight for that seat going to be? If it comes down to 1 or 2 seats to control Congress, I can't even imagine the amount of money that will pour into that. We could see a $30 or $40 million contest with all the outside money that would come pouring into that if control of Congress hinges on that 1 seat. And wouldn't it be wild if control of Congress hinged on a seat in Utah, a Democratic-leaning seat in Utah? That would be a lot of fun. Nathan Detroit asks, did Gibson comment at all on the plaintiff's map 2? Was it disqualified because it used map C as a baseline? I seem to remember in her opinion, she said that the plaintiff's map 2 was not a part. It was under the tests that were applied. It was not a partisan gerrymander, and they drew it specifically to fit with the tests under SB 1011. That is the bill from Brady Brammer that tried to rig the system so that the judge would have no choice but to pick map C. But I think that she said in her ruling, I'm pretty sure she said in her ruling that it was not a partisan gerrymander. But again, the map that's on the screen right now, this is plaintiff's map 1. Even though it still has 3 overwhelmingly Republican districts and 1 seemingly overwhelming Democratic district, it is much fairer than the map that it replaces. The map that it replaces is completely unfair when looking at partisan tilt. That boy on TikTok says, some people have already thrown their hat in the ring. Do you have any predictions on favorites? It's going to be a wide open contest. I think that it's anybody who does not get signatures, I think is going to be in trouble, because you don't want to leave it up to the delegates at convention. I think it's going to be the most well-attended Democratic convention in years. But again, I think if the candidates do not get signatures, it's a crapshoot at convention. You want to make sure that you are on that primary ballot. And getting signatures is going to cost money. And I'm sure that there's only a few signature gathering firms out there. And the big one in the state is Gathering. And what candidates will do is they will sign an exclusive with Gathering. They will pay more than what the normal rate is. So they are the only campaign that Gathering collects signatures for. Senator Mike Lee did that in 2022. I think Brad Wilson did it in 2024 when he collected signatures to get on the map. There are a few other firms from out of state, but it's going to cost a lot of money to get signatures. You cannot do it with volunteers alone. You do need to supplement with paid signature gatherers, simply because it's such a Herculean task. You have such a small amount of time in the winter, starting in January, to collect 7,000 signatures from registered voters in the state, and you have to collect more than that because you assume that some are going to be thrown out. So it's going to cost a lot of money to get signatures. But if you're not getting signatures, it's political malpractice there. Troy Riley on TikTok says, do you think the national attention on Utah maps plays a role? Absolutely. There's already a lot of national attention. And don't forget, I mean, the Republicans are trying to put a couple of issues on the ballot for 2026, and one of them is to repeal Prop 4. So Prop 4, either way, could be on the ballot in 2026. Outside Republican groups have committed millions of dollars, from what I've been told, to help with that with the signature gathering effort to put that citizens initiative on the ballot, that ballot initiative to repeal Prop 4. So there's already a lot of national attention. I know the White House was paying very close attention to what is happening here in Utah. I think it's weird that Map C is the one that everybody got behind, but I do know that the White House was paying attention, very close attention to what was happening. Besmirch on TikTok says, I am much more familiar with Democrats, if not one of our current reps. Is there a centrist that might run? I think that there's a great opportunity if there is a centrist Republican who has some money and some name recognition, yeah, they absolutely could run. Kelly Mousley says, do you think that Utahns are watching the Trump corruption, and is it making any difference in their support? Utah is a Republican state. It's over 50% Republican. Trump is not overwhelmingly popular here. We are the reddest anti-Trump state in the union, if that makes any sense. But people are coming around. The Republican base is 100% on board with Trump. They're the ones who control the convention. So if there is going to be a centrist, back to your question about this on TikTok, if there's going to be a centrist, they're going to have to, again, collect signatures to get on the ballot. But if I am a centrist Republican, I've got some money, I'm ambitious, why not challenge Mike Kennedy? He's a freshman. He hasn't raised an insane amount of money. I'm sure he'll be able to ramp that up, but why not? We saw what happened with Colby Jenkins against Celeste Malloy in 2024. He challenged her. He ran a primary challenge to her and almost knocked her off. So who knows? Nathan Detroit says, Blake Moore is establishment, not necessarily centrist. He might have the best chance, but he'll stay in CD2. Yeah, Blake Moore is a member of Republican leadership. Anybody who wants to run against him, and I know that there are some extreme far-right Republicans who are allied with Senator Mike Lee who are itching to run against Blake Moore, but Blake Moore will have all the money he needs. But you're right. I think Moore is establishment. He might have a chance in CD2, but I do think that if this map stays the way it is, you're going to see Republicans highly motivated to come to the ballot, and I don't know how motivated Republicans are. Democrats highly motivated to come to the ballot, and Democrat voting independents. That's where a lot of this is going to be. Independents and Republicans who are willing to vote for a Democrat. That's why I think a true progressive is going to have a hard time winning a general election. They might be able to win a primary. But again, the Democratic primary is not closed. The Republican primary, you have to be a Republican to vote in it. Democrat, as long as you don't vote in the Republican primary, anybody can vote in the Democratic primary, which is another wild card to add to this. Okay, we've got a lot of the questions now are repeats, and I apologize if you're repeating your question, I don't get to it. I'm going to put this out as a podcast tomorrow, so you'll be able to listen to this discussion, and that will be on my website, utahpolitics.news. My website is Utah Political Watch. That's a sign in the back. Let me see. I'll go the right way. You can see it there. That's my website. I'm an independent journalist. That's where I write. That's where I do all my coverage. I've covered Utah politics for more than 25 years. You can go to my website right now, utahpolitics.news. You can sign up for my newsletter. That's free. If you want to support what I do, if you want to get extras, an extra newsletter in the morning, access to our Discord channel. That's subscriber only. We have some fun in there. Nathan Detroit, who's on the YouTube, he's very active in the Discord channel. You can become a member. You can become a paid subscriber for $5 a month. You get all that stuff. I'll send you some stickers. Because I'm independent. I don't have a corporation behind me. I don't have a billionaire backer. Readers are the ones who make this possible, and I don't think I'd have it any other way. I don't think I want a corporation telling me what I can and cannot write. I want to be accountable to the readers. Because I do stuff like this, and this is a lot of fun. It is so much fun. This has been the best live stream that we've done since I started doing this. You guys have had great questions. I really appreciate all of you. But I've been going for 90 minutes and my voice is about to give out. So I think I'm going to wrap it up here. But again, my website, utahpolitics.news. I hope you go over there and sign up for my newsletter. Again, it's free. If not, if you want to support this, you can either throw some bucks in the tip jar or if you don't want a subscription. But all of that makes what I do possible. Again, no corporations, no billionaires. It's you. I answer to you. My readers are my boss. So do me a favor, head over there. Again, thank you everybody for joining the live tonight. This has been a blast. It's been a lot of fun. Great questions. I'm sure that more stuff is going to happen in the next week. And if it is, we'll do it again. You can send me an email. My email's on the website. I'm on all the social media channels. You can find me there. Send me a DM. Let me know if there's something I didn't cover tonight that you want to hear. This is going to be available as a podcast tomorrow. I'll put it out as soon as I can. But again, thank you for joining. And my website again is utahpolitics.news. This has been great, guys. Thank you so much. But my voice is giving out and it's time for me to go. So I hope everybody has a great night and we will talk to you again soon.